I mean, let's
Definitely.
claim it. Let's claim it.
Right. We all about clamation and reclamation. So,
Clamation.
hi, I'm Aaron,
And I'm Dr. Kia, and this is the Ratchet Roundtable podcast,
where we explore the defiant, irreverent, unapologetic ways that everyday folks get free
and thrive. On today's episode, we're talking to Dr. Jose Lizarraga, award-winning content creator, artist, researcher, and educator. They examine how AI, social media, TV, and other digital tech shapes learning, identity, and social change.
They're also the loving parent of the popular doggy drag queen RuPaul, two-time Webby Award-winning Chihuahua extraordinaire. Join us for a whimsical, joyful, emotional roller coaster ride. Here's our conversation.
Meeting you was affirmation that I was on the right track. Like, I knew I was in my purpose, but I needed to know that I had a place in that world and that my work had value and meaning. And so you did that for me, and I'm so grateful.
Oh, that's so, it's so interesting because it was such a relatively speaking, it felt like such a brief moment in time, but the feeling was mutual, right? Because obviously, like I know your mom's work, right? Because of who she is, right? And and I remember like seeing that I was going to be a chair and discussant on your panel on the round table, and I had the same nervousness and panic. And I'm like, oh my god, like Kia Darling Hammond is going to be on this round table that I'm supposed to be chairing, right? And I was like I better not fuck this up, right? And you set the paper ahead of time, and I'm like, this person is brilliant. And I think one of the things that you should know that at that moment of time, I was still a doc student, right? And I was like trying to navigate, and I was like about to graduate, but I was still a doc student. And at that moment of time, I was in learning sciences and literacy studies, and I had been told that I shouldn't be leading with my work around queerness, right? That if I was going to be marketable in an R1, that I needed to be leading with my skill set that set me up as a learning scientist and as a literacy scholar, right? And so a lot of my publication stuff that was coming out then in my scholarly output was around that purpose of like preparing me for the tenure track market. And so there were all those layers of like, oh my god, I better not fuck this up. I like, oh my god, this is a brilliant scholar. I'm on this on this round table. And when I met you, it was kind of a similar kind of kismet thing where it was like I felt a mutual validation, and that I almost felt a little more emboldened to say, you know what? No, it's okay if I lead with my work around with queer communities. Um and it's okay that is part of like my identity, and that somehow this notion that somehow I'm going to be siloed into a very specific track that is not going to allow me to be marketable across other spaces um was in a sense disrupted and affirmed in very interesting ways. I will say as a side note, and I think I've told you this, I think one of the most nerve-wracking things for me, I hadn't met your mom that by then. I had only read her work, and she was there, y'all. Like her mom was at her round table, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm
She
so
was.
nervous. And Kia was like, Mom, where are the copies? Or something like that. And she's like, oh no, I have to go run and make. So like you see her mom like running off to make copies and came back and like, here are the copies of the round table. And I was like, oh my goodness. What did I say? And this, I'm paraphrasing. I told your mom, wow, it's so great that you are like supporting Kia right now. She's like, above all, I am a mother, and above all, I am here because I know that my daughter is a brilliant scholar. And so like both of those things like became this like, oh my God, like this is what's possible in academia. And similarly to what you're
Mm.
describing, right? Like love leading with like the relationships and that type of framing is what makes the work powerful and not this kind of like mechanical like it's so yeah, I can tell you that obviously the way that I talk about it, that ARA moment was it was pivotal. It
Mm.
was ratchet in its own way in that it was just because I want to make sure we're bringing in the name of
Yes.
the podcast.
Mhm.
uh, um,
Love this.
in that it like it reframed things in a way that was queer, in a way that it was that was like dignity and human affirming. It's just beautiful. Anyway, that was a great introduction. Thank you, Kia. And I think it's because of where we're at right now. Like the delight part is like, what is like making me not cry every day and actually making me cry, but for delight and not yeah, the good reasons. Yeah, I was like music is I think it's one of those things that pulls me out and pulls me into to the space that I want to be around delight. Now, unsurprisingly, because I'm gay and or queer and I know that she can be problematic, but like I have been listening to Lady Gaga's um Abracadabra like too much, where my husband's like, can you please put your headphones on? um and it brings me joy for a couple of reasons. One is that I was able to create some content for my pooch, and and we've recorded all these videos, and I have to record a couple of cameos that people requested that she wear the Lady Gaga stuff, so I have to do that. So it's been giving me joy for the reasons that it makes me feel nostalgic for like old Lady Gaga. The song is okay, and we all know that politically she's kind of like, mm. um, but for me, I would like what the music does for me in terms of revisiting the person that I was in early 2008 and or mid 2008 and early 2009, right? And it was like the hope and possibility, the partying, the my joints not hurting.
Meganese.
Exactly. Like, oh, I sneezed and my back hurts now. Like I could sneeze before and it wouldn't throw out my back. Or back then I was running like 10 miles a day. I
Oh
was running
my.
around Lake Merritt 3 times every day,
Mm.
girl. My knees are all jacked up now. But um that's what that song does for me. It's kind of like, okay, I can revert back to a time where like I don't have all these student loans, where
Mm. Ashe.
where like where like I was working like and working my butt off. I wasn't making very much money, but like it was a different sense of responsibility, um, and joy and hope. I think what's hard right now for me is to like, and I know other people are probably feeling this, is to like have hope because of like, didn't we just already go through this? Kind of like situation. We've felt like we've gone through so much and we've made so many strides, and it feels like huge steps backwards. What it does for me is that it's almost like a like, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but like it does something to my chemistry, my brain chemistry, to listen to that song and be like, that delight of like, I'm not gonna worry about this right now. I'm gonna dance. I'm like gonna
Just
remember.
Dance.
Just dance. Oh yeah,
Do
that's
you love that song?
Just Dance. And I did, and this is like a a two-sided thing where like I did see Lady Gaga when she was doing the club circuit in San Francisco in May of 2008 before she became big, and but I can't remember which club it was for the life of me. Like, was it at Mecca? Was it at Stud? I have like, and so I like posted on Facebook, like, does anybody remember? Because I like my old age, I can't remember when I first saw her. Anyway, that's giving me delight. Hanging out with my husband, hanging out with my little pooch, also is something that I'm doing to feel not completely hopeless and out of it.
And I have a question for those who don't know about your pooch. Can you tell us a little bit more? What's good with RuPaul?
This is RuPaul. This is a mannequin, by the way. It's not really her back behind me. RuPaul is considered the world's first doggy drag queen. We've won 2 Webbies. Actually, you can see one of them right there. Webby is considered the Oscar of the internet. So she won 2 of them, and she was nominated 1 year that we didn't win. But it was fine. We don't need more than 2. I don't know where to put it. It's really cool because it's actually a spring, and so when I sew, the vibrations make the spring bounce.
Cute.
Anyway,
it's cute.
She's RuPaul, the doggy drag queen. So she's since 2000 and oh my god, maybe it was 2017, around season 9 of RuPaul's Drag Race. That's when we started recreating some of the looks and posting them, and all the drag queens know her from RuPaul's Drag Race, and so that's what we do. But we have a socio-political edge to it, where we like, and I wrote about it a couple of years ago, where we'll have like full-on like arguments with drag queens around like socio-political stuff. There was one time that Bob the drag queen said something about higher education. I can't remember what it was. And me as RuPaul went in there and was like, actually, communities of color depend on this like upward mobility. Education still has this type of signifier around. It was like so like interesting because it's kind of because like it was Bob the drag queen, so we were like going back and forth, and it was one of those things where like she's talking to a dog. She doesn't know there's like a PhD behind this account. And so it's really interesting to think about her influence in those terrains. And there was one time, when Black Lives Matter, in 2020, when the protests were happening, we like went out full force and were like BLM, like right on all our socials, and the incessant comments were like, why isn't the real RuPaul like the human RuPaul saying anything? Why is this pooch? That's why we love the pooch, because she's far more aligned with our politics. I'm like, And you remember season 10, the Vixen. She was one of the people who was calling out the anti-blackness of the show. Like, she was widely derided by the fandom, but she's like, ultimately people have come out to say, oh, the Vixen was right all along. But she, like, we still DM with her, and she actually sent the dog a birthday message yesterday, because it was our dog's birthday yesterday. So
an Aquarian queen, yes.
She is Aquarian. Yeah, my husband's Aquarian too, so I have 2 Aquarians, and I'm a Capricorn, so I'm a control freak who's doesn't like that they're so like, aren't you gonna like anyway.
Inside.
It's like,
I
okay,
like this inside
let
look.
me reel that in.
Mhm. And I'm curious if there was any other story or experience that came up for you when you were thinking through the whole question of like ratchetness as liberation before we got here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny because I think there were two questions around like, has anybody ever been ratchet to you? And there was like,
Yes, what
I
is the
was,
most ratchet?
I was just kind of like, because what's interesting about ratchet and in terms of his dual meaning, right? Like,
Hmm.
there's that out of pocket moment where like, if I'm going to admit it, some of the people who do the most out of pocket things are not necessarily attuned with the ratchet aesthetic, but are like can be hella ratchet in a way that is like harmful and can't be repurposed, right? And so
Hmm.
I feel like when I was contemplating that question, I was thinking about the source of the ratchetness and whether I could think about it as ratchet and not just outright kind of like, I'm gonna say it, like a white supremacist moment, right? Like I have to like make sure that I'm intentional when I'm using the ratchet term or the ratchet like frame
Hmm.
when describing something that was done to me, because I feel like the ratchet allows for a certain kind of tapping into a different source of healing
Hmm.
and and what's it called, agency and power, that an enactment of white supremacy is harder to reformulate, right? And so
Hmm.
that question was giving me a lot of pause, right? Because I'm like, oh my god, the most ratchet thing that somebody could have done to me was done by a white person. But then I was like, actually, was that ratchet? I don't think it was ratchet. I think it
Or
was
was it
just
just
like,
disrespectful?
exactly, right? Right?
Mm.
And so like I was struggling with that question for that reason, in that like I do think about like the things that kin and family have done, right? That
Mhm.
it's easier for me to think about that as something that's ratchet because I'm able to kind of like re reframe it and formulate it in a way that I'm like, oh, that actually pushed me to be a better person in this way, that they did that to
Mm.
me, right?
Mm.
Versus the other instance where like I'm like, oh no, that person was just hateful and was trying to like bring me
Mhm.
down because they they don't respect me.
Mhm.
um
Mm.
but the question of ratchetness, like, in it was easier for me to to think about it within the framing of, or the my experience growing up, because we have a term that's kind of similar but not really, called rascuachismo. Um, and Ibarra Fausto has written about the aesthetics of rascuachismo. But rascuachismo is like, it is kind of the ratchet, but it's like the ingenuity of like of countering the respectability of politics, or the aesthetics of respectability, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, you
yes.
seem really excited about
Yes. This is it. This is it. This is it.
it.
Yes.
And
Mm.
so, I grew up hella poor. Like my mom and dad, Mexican. My mom was from Sinaloa, from Jalisco. My dad is from Sinaloa, but they both met in Sonora, which is a different state, and it's a border state to Arizona. Um, and they met there. They fell in love at a grocery store. My mom was a cashier, and my dad was the butcher, right? And they fell in love. Um, but they were also like of modest means in Mexico, and they because it was a border town that they lived on, they would travel back and forth to the US either for job opportunities, but mostly to do some shopping and then come back for, they had that kind of the daily visa type of situation. But later on in life, they moved up to California, and they had me in California and raised me in Salinas, California. Now, one of the things about them being of modest means, and growing up kind of poor, and my dad, the rascuache aesthetic was like everywhere in our home because we had dogs, but we couldn't afford to have a nice fence. And so my dad built a fence out of like scraps that he found like laying around like the town that we lived on. So our fence like was raggedy, but it fulfilled its purpose, right? In that like the dog, it did what it needed to do. Not to say that I wasn't embarrassed, and so that's another part of what I'll talk about. In that he was about like doing with what we had. My mom like literally like cleaning, like she didn't buy rags. Like we didn't have money to be buying cleaning rags. We used old t-shirts, old socks to like clean or mop, right? Like we weren't out there like paying money to have rags. Like we have plenty of rags, the old clothes that don't fit anymore or that got a Clorox stain on it or whatever. Like we use that's the rag now. So like
You're
so
upcycling.
we're upcycling, right? This notion of upcycling,
Sustainability, baby.
girl, and we all know about the cookie tins with the sewing stuff, or
Oh yes,
the butter containers with like full of
I feel like
beans.
what you're saying is we all know about the disappointment. We all know about the disappointment
Oh
of the
yeah,
absence
opening
of cookies. That's
Yeah.
what. That's what.
Have you all seen that video? Like, there's like all these TikToks of like Rasquatch and and the guy who goes and he's like, oh my god, finally I'm gonna be able to buy these. I'm an adult now. I can buy these cookies, right? And he goes to the store, he buys the cookies, and it's sealed, right? Like, and he gets home and he opens it, and it's sewing. It's like,
Oh,
what?
wow. It's like, I can't wait.
And I feel the same way with butter containers. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have butter with my toast, and you open it, and it's like refried beans or rice. So how does this even happen? Yeah. So the duality of it though is that, for me, the rascuache growing up was a source of like embarrassment for a while, right? And so because I going to school and being considered a gifted and talented kind of learner early on in as a child, there was an interesting positioning that I started finding myself in, that I was if I was going to be successful, there was a certain like persona that I had needed, an aesthetic that really I needed to start presenting outward in the world, right? The clothes, and it's I still remember my mom, because we used to we would buy our tennis shoes at the flea market, at the indoor swap meet, right, where they had all the bootleg everything, right? And I had been wanting some Nikes, and my mom's like, I'm gonna get you some Nikes. And so she got me some Nikes, but from Steve. And my mom, how was my mom gonna know that Nike did not make like Chuck Taylor's stuff? Like, not Chuck, what are those Chucks? Like,
Chuck Taylors?
They're called Chuck Taylors,
With the
right?
high, yep.
The high top. Nike doesn't make those. Like,
I mean, they do now, but that's another story.
Now, but they did not when I was growing up, right?
Right.
Everybody knew.
And so everybody knew when I walked into that
Mhm.
elementary school that my shoes were bootleg. But the and then like I didn't want friends to come to my house because we had a fence made out of like literal like sticks
Mhm.
and twine, right? And like I didn't want them to accidentally see like one of my old like t-shirts being used as a rag. Like, it's like all this 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 embarrassment of like the respectability that all of a sudden I was thrust into trying to embody meant that I had to like rewrite my own history and not for the purposes of like being like, look, I'm one of you, right? I am
Mhm.
one of you. Like, oh, my parents live. I remember in high school telling people that my parents had a ranch.
Mm.
Like, I don't know why, because but this is a truth. We lived out by the ranches, but it was a
Mhm.
cooperative that was for farm workers. And so
Mm.
in Salinas and in certain parts of the agricultural areas of California, there's intentional communities, not in the ways in the hippie intentional communities that you might be thinking, but intentional communities that were created for farm workers to have a place to live, right? In a sense, it's kind of like um, kind of a segregationist type
Mm.
of thing.
Mhm.
But it was like a safe place for like farm workers to live, and they could take a bus to the strawberry fields, the lettuce fields, wherever. But for a while, I was like, yeah, we have a ranch. No, I lived in a cooperative out by the strawberry fields. Um, and so it's taken me a while to kind of like in my early adulthood to see the Rasquache aesthetic as a one uh something that was uh centered ingenuity that that was actually eco-friendly if you think about it. um that was um something that was around like maintaining dignity in the world that was hell bent on erasing that dignity for specific communities, right? And I had to come to terms that my with the fact that my denial or embarrassment around that aesthetic was contributing to that harm. Like, coming back home and telling my dad, like, why don't you buy a rail fence? Like, what that was signaling was that, my disappointment and like him not adhering to kind of like this normative way of and he couldn't afford it. There was no way he could afford to buy a brand new fence, right? So I mean, what this notion of, or this like revisiting of the 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 ratchet and the rasquache for me just feels um it's like when I start like historicizing it, it actually makes me really emotional. Because it's intertwined with my own um in a way very harmful and emotional uh, trajectory of getting to where I am now, right? A Stanford, Berkeley graduate who who uh, who gives off airs of having, and I'm saying this because people have said this to me, that I
Mm.
give off airs of having had a more privileged
Mm.
upbringing than I actually have had, right? And at a certain point in my life, I think that felt like a compliment.
Mm.
But now it feels like, oh, like fuck. Like, no, that's not. And let me give you another example of
Yes,
where
please.
where
Mhm.
of where this felt like a punch in the gut, right?
I
I
was.
that was not the like there were other punches in the gut. They continue to happen, by the way. I was in my early 20s. I was working in a very elite um, elementary school in San Francisco. I had just graduated with an art degree that I was either going to work as a barista or work as a teaching assistant
As a
or
teaching
administrator
assistant.
at a private high school where I didn't need a credential, right?
Mhm.
Private school. So I formed part of a startup school in San Francisco. I won't say the name just in case they want to try to come after me. Um, uh, they were a startup school that was meant to serve a very elite
Mhm.
families in San Francisco. Um, this type of school is all over the East Coast. Presidents send their kids to those schools. You're already kind of catching my drift.
I know the
And this is
vibe.
and this is the first one in the Bay Area, right?
Mm.
So I was one of their first employees within the first 3 years. I helped build a lot of the administrative infrastructure, like students facing kind of like and parent facing. And again, I had an art degree, but I was always good at this kind of stuff. I taught sign language and everything. That's not the point. Is that I was working at a very elite school for millionaires and celebrities, and I fit in because of the way that I speak and by the way that I dress. I've always been kind of like a fashion girl who was spending too much money on fashion and not enough money on food, which went well because then I could fit into the fashion. But it was not good for my health.
Yeah.
And all bodies are beautiful, and I should have loved my body better back then.
Period. Oh, not that last part. I'm sorry.
We come to where we are when we get there.
Exactly.
We get there when we get there.
Say, why was I not only eating rice? That was not good for me. That's right. I didn't have enough money because I was buying Gucci t-shirts that I couldn't afford. So it was never explicit. I never talked about my family, right? But like people knew that I was of Mexican descent. I was Latino. That I spoke perfect Spanish and that I spoke perfect English. So eventually became the liaison to the community to the diversity. The diverse community we're trying to attract into our communities, into our school community. But my mom came to visit, my family came to visit, and my then boss, who was the head of school, met my mom, and I was translating for my mom, and they ended up leaving, and then I was having a meeting with the head of school after, like maybe a couple of days after that, and she said, I want to be honest with you, that and she's white, so whenever they say that, you have to start like, oh, what are you about to say?
Okay.
Your parents are not who I expected them to be. And I'm like, oh, say more. It's like, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know they didn't speak English. And I'm like,
is that a problem?
She's like, it's just so impressive, like how far you've come from your upbringing. And I'm like, what? In my head, right? But I was in my 20s, so I'm like, oh, thank you. It really did feel like a punch in the gut. Like, I mean, yes, there is kind of like, oh, there's a sense of safety and feeling that you belong in this space where like you're not hyper visible in the ways that you don't want to be hyper visible, right? But like spiritually, I'm like, wow, this is not good. This is not good that I'm even in. Back then I thought it was inadvertent, but now I'm like, maybe I'm in advertently Is that a word?
Yeah. Inadvertently, yeah.
Advertently.
Yeah.
I am advertently. I have a PhD. Advertently, I don't know. Google that. ChatGPT
It's a
is
word now.
advertently. It's
I mean,
advertently.
let's claim it. Let's claim it.
Right.
Mhm.
We all about clamation and reclamation, so
Clamation. You know, it's just it's the ways that I was trying to make myself fit into these spaces. And the thing is that it then continued to happen in other spaces too, right? Like that was a gut punch, and I was like, but there was a moment where I was like, no, like then I started having my parents come like every year to like sell tamales, and their tamales became really popular in the school. Like all my parents, the school parents knew my parents. When is your mom coming? Oh my God, these are the best tamales I've ever had in my life. Um, that's when I found out I was part Japanese, by the way. That's a different story. Really quick, should I tell that?
Surprise.
yeah.
Because that's ratchet in itself. Speaking of erasing or changing your history, right? Like
Mhm.
my parents started coming to sell tamales every year, and one year, I was sitting behind the table with my dad. We were selling tamales at a table, and this woman came up, bought tamales, and walked away. A woman who I know is Japanese, and her child is Japanese. And my dad said to me, wow, that person looks just like my grandmother. My dad is a light-skinned Mexican, straight hair, tall, like 6'4". Um, uh, and I looked at him and was like, that woman is Japanese. What are you talking about? He had never mentioned his grandmother to me, by the way. And he said, oh yeah, your grandmother was Japanese. Like right
Surprise.
there. Surprise. And I was like, what? Mind you, in my early 20s, I had gone to Japan as part of a scholarship and had come back and told my parents, I don't understand it. Like, I feel like I was home there. A lot of the people look like me. I have pictures of my host family. We look a lot alike. And my parents were like, oh, okay, well, that's weird. And then, like, 8 years later, my dad says this to me, right? And it turns out that, and it was interesting because he was like, well, you need to understand that above all, you're Mexican. And I'm like, oh. So there was some weird nationalist type of thing there. Also, I think like racist, to be honest. Like he's like, no, you're Mexican, you're not Asian. And I'm like, what, is that a bad thing? Like, so it's an interesting kind of like the rewriting of history has happened in other parts of my life, and in my attempts to like map out my broader history. I've been seeing the very things that I've been hard on myself on around, like, you know, denying my rascuachismo, denying my ratchetness for the purposes of respectability. I feel that is something that is intergenerational, and it happens in different ways, right? And it's hard because I think about what's the denial of ratchetness and rascuachismo means for the broader project of colonialism and white supremacy,
and capitalism.
In capitalism, I mean that it fulfills that purpose, right? To deny those things. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. I'm so sorry.
I do.
Well,
I do.
listen,
It
I'm
all
with
makes
you.
sense. Mm-hmm.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
thinking
like,
about. I'm thinking about. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's been raining where you are in Davis, but it's been raining a lot down here. In the Bay, and my family kept the plastic bags in the back of the cupboard. And the reason I bring that up is because there are these rain shoe covers that I've been wanting for a while. They've been sold out, right? And I part of my commute is on my bike,
Mhm.
so I was like, there's nothing worse than getting to
Dog
work with
issues.
wet socks. Like, so
Oh,
I
sorry.
pulled these. It's the worst.
It's really bad.
So I looked outside. I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna pull these Target bags out and wrap these around my shoes, and we're gonna get on my bike, take my bike on the train, and we're gonna do this. And I wish somebody would say something about these Target bags, because it felt in that moment like, I don't know, kind of like a reclamation of my own childhood, like from a sustainability standpoint, from a ratchet standpoint, like, I'm sure people were like, oh, this poor, homeless person, just trying to make do, with their bike and their train ticket. And I'm like,
Listen, those
listen,
Target bags are good too. They're thick.
yo,
They're thick.
They are thick. I've been using them to like pack my bags and stuff, my shoes and stuff.
Yes.
Like they're really good.
Yes. My intersection between that energy, like the rasquache, the ratchetness, and this part of me that always wants everything to be pristine, is
Mm.
I fold the Target bags into these adorable little triangles that are easy to store, and I line them up tidily in a little box, and that's where I keep them.
I fold them, but I should be doing that because they're easier to manage that way.
They're so, yeah, these little, like,
Because they
so
don't, mine are
cute.
not stacking properly, so they keep
it's like
falling.
Ratchet
as you
Gami.
fold them. Ratchet
Ratchet
Gami.
Yeah. And my mom does the same thing. She puts leftovers. They're called Tupperware in our house, but what they are is like leftover containers from other things, right? Like, so you finish the butter and then you put the things in the butter container. Like, that is how it is in our house. And it's interesting because we started out not having a lot at all, right? When my
Mhm.
parents met, they were capital P, capital O, capital O, capital R.
I'm like spelling it. I'm like, yes, I have a PhD.
What is she talking about?
I was like hanging on to that last letter too. I was like, what is POO? R. Oh, R. Poor. Okay.
Again. Yes. They would live on like a package of hot dogs and like fruit cocktail, and that was what they would eat. And but then later on, my mother's career took off, and she didn't come from much, neither did my dad. Like, they didn't come from money. Is the make a way out of no way folks. But then once her career really took off, we suddenly had resource, and we had resource, right? And so it was very different. She still did not give a fuck about a formal Tupperware,
I know that's right.
or designer clothes, or you name it. The one thing, her one splurge is her pool. She's got to have her pool so that she can swim.
Nice. That's good. That's health.
No, and that's what it is. That's right. It's health, and health is wealth, as they say. But yeah, she's not. My dad, on the other hand, my dad's styly, so he likes
Said
to
you
dress.
won't catch me with these Target bags.
No scuffs, no wrinkles, no,
Mm.
no. Always so fly and put together. Anyway, I just really related to the story that you told, even though it was such a different story to my own. There were so many similarities too. I remember in we moved from Maryland where we could just sort of be ourselves to New York. We were in Westchester County where we were surrounded by really wealthy people, sort of
Hmm.
like, here, like the Hillsdale kind of energy, So in that era, when I was there, it was the late 80s, everybody was wearing Gap clothes. And these kids would go and their parents would spend hundreds of dollars at the Gap and they wear these damn scrunchy socks and these shorts and these matching t-shirts, and I wanted those Gap clothes, and my mama said, you want to get a job, you could get a Gap clothes job. And so I did. I got my first job when I was like
At the Gap?
14.
Oh.
No, and
But you
that
talking
would have
about
been
like you have McDonald's, you got McDonald's money, like
that would have been smart, but then I would have had to spend my money, my allowance bus
There.
lunch money to get there just to work, to you know what I
Oh.
mean.
Yeah.
So I worked at the
word.
Baskin Robbins, which I could walk to, which was down the road, and I used my little piddly ass check to buy a pair of jeans. Like that was my thing. Like I would like use my little check, I'd buy my little hot dogs and my, get on the bus or whatever. But I'd use that little check to buy a pair of like I don't know, at that time I think they were like $30 or $50
Oh my
pair of jeans,
God.
like
Well, that was a lot of
nonsense.
money back then.
And that was
Hmm.
it. And nothing about that actually made me fit in or part of that community in any
Hmm.
meaningful way, but I did get some sense of belonging, and that is
Hmm.
really powerful. And now I
Hmm.
get that sense of belonging from the opposite, right? The people, like
Hmm.
we said at the beginning, the people who are twerking in the crosswalk, as Tez said the last time. Our
Hmm.
last guest was Tez
Hmm.
Files, and he was talking about his
Hmm.
friends just like getting out of the car when the music's nice and dancing in the streets and getting
Hmm.
back in the car. That was where I actually found belonging. Um, was it those communities? Anyway, all of what you said resonated. All of it.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to think about the ways that this connects us, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in a more, what's interesting to me is that respectability and the aesthetics and politics around that seek to connect in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want you to feel connected in the ways that you're talking about, Kia, in a very in a specific way, right? Of belonging into whiteness and belonging
Mm-hmm.
into and I there was something that you said that I contend with on a daily basis, right? Because I went to art school
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of white people,
Mm-hmm. So you can
and
afford to go. Mm-hmm.
I know, and I'm still paying for that degree, um, because it's expensive, um, and uh, but it's interesting how taste is like shaped, right, by
Mm-hmm.
institutions and by whiteness. And I felt that when I went to art, one of the I mean, there were multiple institutions that started shaping the respectability and the uh and the non-ratchet, kind of pristine um um aesthetic of how one should live one's
Mm-hmm.
everyday life. Um uh And so that started happening in elementary school and through high school. But in art school, which is supposed to be like the space of like broader expression,
Creativity, abundance. Mm-hmm.
creativity, there's still that that
Mm-hmm.
that that framing, the
It's like
imposition of
manufactured.
structure. It's so interesting because when I graduated, because I had been doing like a lot of portraiture and like a lot of different type of work, and then I was doing what's called, back then it was called recombinant media. I was integrating like technology into my art practice. I was creating painting machines. I was
Mm.
doing all this crazy stuff, and I didn't document it all properly. That's bad on me. I can't like I can't find any of the pictures. But when one of my mentors was like, well, if you want to be, you're a little too ethnic in your practice, and I'm sure you're gonna make it like as like if you design like stuff for people to put on their walls at like IKEA and stuff. Like it was just like so condescending. And I was like, you know what? You want white paint? You want white paintings? I'm gonna give you white paintings. So my senior show was literally white paintings. I took canvases and I would break them apart and put them back together, paint them white, and just put them in a gallery space. That was my last show. And it was like a real, like I was gonna get my degree already anyway, and I had been so disillusioned. Can I tell you how like all my white professors,
They
this
ate it
is
up.
the best artwork you've ever created? I'm like, that's what it was. I was intentionally being ratchet because I was like, this shit is like, this is like, I'm literally, oh my God, I'm about to cry because it just made me realize something. I was doing what my dad did with those fences, right? I hadn't even thought about it this way. Shit. But I was doing it with canvas frames. And I was like throwing the ratchetness in their face, but painting it white, and they ate it up. And I stopped painting for a while. I stopped doing art for a while. And that's when I started doing administration and you know, and it led me down this path of becoming an educational scholar. And in the past maybe 6 years is when I started revisiting the artistic part. And the ratchetness really I haven't started revisiting that until a couple of years ago. And in fact, Arturo, my husband, and I and our colleague, Eddie Rivero at Teachers College, we just published a piece last summer called Algorithmos Literacies. And it's about kind of the ratchet aesthetic that some of our participants use in exploring AI and so on. So it does feel like it's a thing that it's a concept that I need to revisit in other key moments of my life. And I appreciate, and this is unscripted, y'all. This when I saw your invitation to do the Ratchet podcast, I was like, wow, this is an opportunity to crack open some really like I said, I was contending with this question of like of ratchetness and how like it's so woven into my. But look at what just happened right now. It also just allowed me to revisit something through this lens in a way that I hadn't really thought about it. I know it felt like a resistance. It really did when I did it, but not connected and linked to my history in such a profound way, specifically with my dad, in the way that you helped me just understand it.
Thank you for allowing us to be here with you on this journey. For real, this has been really cool. I'm hearing you say that it's a reclamation of pride in the ratchet. And that's very powerful to me.
Yeah, there is a reclamation there. We just came back from Mexico City. That was one I almost didn't want to come back because it was right when this person got. We were there during that, like on the 20th. We came back on the 23rd, I think. And we live in Davis, and we have, it's a very kind of manicured. It's not at the Palo Alto level, but it is kind of a manicured college town space. Feels really safe. They have green belts. We have a cute little house with a beautiful backyard for the pooch. Every Saturday I do deep clean of the house. We have nice artwork. Like, everything is like pristine. But I have like my little sombrero hat and it's my Zoom background, right? That I bought for $5 at the the Mexican market. And and I have these monkeys that I got at Chapultepec. I don't know if you've seen these, but these are these like they're called Chango Mion, and they're
Oh,
monkeys that
Oh my
squirt
gosh.
water
Oh,
from their
I'll
tail.
cry.
They are viral right now in Chapultepec in Mexico. If you look for them on TikTok, you'll see all these videos. But they're like, that's ratchet stuff right there. Like, that's not squatchet. Like, that doesn't necessarily fit the aesthetic of like this, like
the Davis suburbs.
not only the Davis suburbs, but also kind of like the who I'm supposed to be at this stage of my life in terms of having a nice house that like only has like serious stuff on the walls. I'm a professional. I should have more books behind me, not like a mannequin of a dog, a sewing machine, and a. I mean, but your books are cool.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? And you're also arguably more professional than I am. But that's not. That is.
Let me not make any faces.
See, Aaron's face giving the lie. It's okay. It's okay.
The point being that, like, and this is what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Where I was like moving this stuff out of the way so that people could only see the curated kind of like, I'm the academic, I'll say, I'm serious. But more and more, I'm kind of like, this is me. Like, this is part of me, right? And having these little monkeys that are like, they're really kind of dumb, right? But I have it like displayed here in my office next to like my like diploma that I got from Stanford, and it's just a juxtaposition of these things are becoming more and more important to me for the reasons of the spiritual and the thing is that during these times I just depend so much on like I like try to like think of my ancestors and elders who have left us, and like I pray to them and say, hey, please guide me right now, please guide me. And if I'm gonna ask them to do that, I shouldn't be actively trying to erase the aesthetics that I know are deeply connected to them, right? Like I'm not a religious person, but I have this candle that I bought at the basilica. And by the way, someone called me a güero there, a white boy. Cause apparently they could tell that I wasn't from Mexico.
They're like, he's Japanese.
Japanese. I know, seriously. Anyway, it's just an interesting. It's a given the political space that we're in right now, I feel like there's for the purpose for the reasons that we mentioned at the beginning before we even started recording, how we are like those friends who are ratchet. There's something about like the how they understand the way that we're trying to make sense of the world in ways that some of our colleagues, even more progressive and well-meaning colleagues, just wouldn't understand. I feel like I need more of those instances in even just surrounding me to kind of anchor me and remind me that this too shall pass, and that You know, they can come for me, but they can never take away my joy.
Mm. Amen to that. I'm really glad that you mentioned because I was thinking about one of the questions. Who is entering with you today,
Mm-hmm.
and you answering that right now in such a poignant way. Like, I know who's with me. Why would I try to erase part of who's with me today if it's
Mhm.
making me who I am today?
Mhm.
So I really appreciate you offering that.
I'm not wearing it, but like I got this really, like, I'm gonna say it's really tacky, like tacky, like $10 necklace that I'm sure would turn my skin green, right?
Green. Mm-hmm.
Because it's not gold. It's gold plated, but I don't even know if it's like gold plated. Um, but it's so, like, I put it on and like it makes me feel so good. It's of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and it has like these
Mm.
like rhinestones, and it like has sharp edges or like pokes, and but it's just kind of
You're like,
like,
yes.
you know what? This is
I feel
dog
like you might.
Gucci. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
You're just revealing other things about yourself. You're like, it causes me pain. I love it. It makes me feel so good.
That's
Yes.
it. Make me feel something.
No, but really,
Oh my
listen, no
god.
hate, no hate.
We listen and we don't judge.
Right? It sounds so much about like coming back to yourself. Like you just keep returning to yourself,
Mhm.
and the deeper and deeper layers of yourself that are represented by those ancestral experiences, those
Mhm.
parental, like the wisdom that your parents brought into the life that they designed, and yourself,
Yeah.
your self. Mm.
Yeah. Often like this I think when when people think about um when people external to us try to connect us to a broader history, right? There's a very specific version of that history that they try to connect us to. And I'm thinking back to that instance where that my white boss said what she said. I didn't That's not what I expected your parents to be like.
Mhm.
Because I it's not that she didn't know my parents were not Mexican, right? Because she knew. Is that I think she thought they were gonna be kind of like, oh, those like well spoken, like she didn't expect them to be like rascuache. She didn't expect them to be
Salt of the
ratchet,
earth.
right? Salt of the earth.
Regular people.
And so I think that's part of what you're mentioning, is what I'm trying to reclaim and reclaim pride around, is that I'm actually glad that my parents weren't. I should be glad that my parents were not those people that other people expected them to be,
Mhm.
because that's what made me who I am today. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway, the last thing I'll say about the dog is that I took the dog with me to Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and you know, she's a California dog. She hated Colorado because it was too cold. But
Mm-hmm.
she's kind of, I think, like inadvertently, I made her kind of a an elitist dog, right? And so I don't think she liked Mexico very much, and that it was a little noisy.
Mm.
But the dogs are different there. And
Oh.
so, but we were in a
Why
nice
wouldn't
part,
they
like we
be?
were, but we not, granted, we were actually in Roma Norte, which is where more of the nicer homes are in 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 Mexico City. And so there were a lot of people with like corgis and like Shih Tzus running
Mm.
around. It wasn't like, but one of the dogs came up to her, and my dog was just like, and it was a Shih Tzu, right? It was a cute, like, expensive dog, and my dog's like, and but then the dog tried to sniff her, and so it was fine. And I was talking to the owner, and the owner was like, "Oh, what a cute Chihuahua!" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's her first time in Mexico. We just got her yesterday." And she turns to the Shih Tzu and she's like, "Háblale en inglés, say hello," because she doesn't understand you. And I'm like, "Great, my dog, is now
Wait,
being seen as a no sabo dog, a
Mm-mm.
dog who doesn't know Spanish." Go ahead, sorry.
this is actually kind of cool. So, one of my students was doing research on sea animals, and it turns out that I think it was dolphins actually have different regional dialects.
Oh, wow.
So it's possible that dogs do too. That might not have been so out of left field as it seems.
Yeah.
Because there are, and so there were like these dolphins that were raised in captivity that were then exposed to these dolphins from like another, maybe they were whales, a different region, and they spoke different versions of dolphin. I don't know how to describe it.
Oh.
And then they started to, and these are emissions, these are sound emissions, right? Like, so language. And they were teaching each other the language from their different regional dialects, basically, and becoming bilingual. It was so cool. So I would not be surprised if,
I
the dog was
know.
speaking Spanish,
Well,
even
the
though
problem
obviously there's
is
Spanish in your household. So I
there
don't,
is, and I
that was
think
disrespectful.
I know. It's so hilarious though. I told Arturo when I came back. He's like, "Oh my god, that is so embarrassing." And like, I don't know why I had to tell them that it was the first time in Mexico. No, so the because I tend to anthropomorphize her, right?
Yeah,
Because
Mm-hmm.
I
of course.
dress her up as like Lady Gaga and other things. But like it's so part of me was kind of like, "Oh my god, am I just like imagining this?" But she was wary of the dogs there. It's almost like she was having trouble communicating with them. So it might have been that. The
It's
one
like,
thing, and I know that we're almost at time, but it reminded me right now because one of the other things that I have been also playing on the loop that I didn't mention was Kendrick Lamar's performance
Super Bowl.
at the Super Bowl, because there are these like dog accounts that are starting to do animations with anyway, and like seeing Venus and doing her
Her crip
crip
walk.
walk is
Oh,
just
Serena. Yeah.
It
Yep.
was a
Serena. Oh my
Serena. It
god,
was
Serena,
Serena.
not Venus.
Yeah.
Serena.
She hit that.
Oh
Which was
my
also her own
god.
reclamation because she did that at the Olympics, I
In
think.
12,
And
no,
then people were, yep.
yeah, it was in 2012. I think it was some open.
Mm-hmm.
She won, and they were, and Arturo and I were actually just talking about that before I came on, because I mentioned that it was a Ratchet podcast. He's like, "Yeah, wonder about the history of like ratchetness and like how like the reclamation of it has different meaning in different contexts and periods of time." He said, "Look at what Serena did at the Super Bowl and how the different type of violence that it did in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
How it's seen, and 13 years ago, it was seen kind of like a moment where she was disrespectful to the establishment, and she probably had ruined her career. Versus now, which is still kind of like white people they're always going to hate, and and but it has a different valence now that she did it at. But you almost have to do it first in a different context.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when ratchetness evolves? I think that was his point. How it evolves temporarily when you do an act of ratchetness at one moment in time in the context, and how it has to do something to catalyze something else, and when it's instantiated later in time in a different context. There was some weird he's very intellectual. He's far more intellectual than I am. I'm like, that was cool. No, he's like, there's an analytic there that you can engage with in terms of like when you enact ratchetness, how it travels, and from an ecological perspective, and let's
My
bring in
mind is like pinging right now. Like,
let's bring in Chris Gutierrez here, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I think it's cool.
It's a both and. It's the
It
both
sure is.
and. Yeah. It does make me think about what Alok talks about in terms of the ways that people who exist in their trans truth
Mm-hmm.
by existing and being visible to people, being simply perceivable,
Mm-hmm.
kind of give people permission to be who they are
Mm-hmm.
just by existing, and also trigger people's trauma around the ways they've sort of made themselves small, made themselves inauthentic to themselves. I was thinking also about your art show, and the canvas and the white, you want white art, I'm gonna give you white art. No, I was wondering whether part of the reason they ate that up was because it was a kind of a refusal. It was defiant. It was ratchet. And in that same way, it sort of, I think that people who are deeply committed to this kind of white supremacist way of existing they're hungry, they're thirsty for those disruptions.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, I wonder how many of these little white creators are going to be crip walking on the internet to Kendrick Lamar. Have they already started?
They started. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is part of the thing for me about ratchetness, is because all of these cultural manifestations, all of these ways that we sort of like disrupt and create spaciousness get kind of co-opted very quickly. And then we still have to keep doing this work. Like, we still have to keep doing this ratchetness, this getting free. And it's just what we do. It's just what we do. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're on an accelerating but slow trajectory toward liberation for everyone, grounded in this particular ethic of refusal and defiance and unapologetic joy that is just, it's such a powerful intervention. But it's also kind of work. It's work.
It is work, because
like the background.
It's what's and this is something that I think I hear you kind of saying, is that the slow progression for liberation for all is still on the backs of our people,
the oppressed,
right? And the oppressed, right? And so, like, there still exists a perceived false equivalency, in that we all know that you see Serena doing this, and then you see Black and brown creators doing it,
and then you see white creators doing it,
and then you see the white creators create, and it's even from an algorithmic perspective, right? Like, we know what the algorithm's going to push versus not, right? We know which communities are going to accept which what is that called? Oh my God, interpolation of I know, I decided to use a word. I should have just said manifestations. Interpolation.
They're both $50 words, so
interpolation of the crip walk, right? It's still perceived differently, and it's still pushed differently, even by our own both social mechanisms and technical algorithmic mechanisms. So.
And it's being treated differently, right? Because folks who saw that from the community were like, hey, and then it became a celebration. And that's a different energy than, ooh, that's cool, I'm going to imitate it and try to leverage it to get myself attention. And I think that is at the heart of a lot of the spirit sickness that we see. It's like, am I good enough? Do you love me? Am I good enough? Do you love me? Am I good enough? Do you love me? Instead of, oh, that speaks to my soul. And I was thinking about what you said about listening to Lady Gaga. Earlier today, I was listening to Cynthia Erivo. And my cells are doing it now. Every cell in my body began to dance. Every cell in my body just sort of like started tingling. Just thinking about it, I have my hair on my arms just standing up and everything. And it was just this like at this deep cellular level. I was thinking about you going on a journey at that cellular level, right back in time to a moment and feeling and embodying and experiencing that moment, and that being such an unusual, right, kind of mystical, magical thing. But I think that we have access to that. I think that's what people are hungry for. I think music is a portal in that way, which is part of the reason why we asked that question on Ratchet Roundtable. What are you listening to on repeat right now? And I do believe that this is part of the doorway that helps us all get free. But there's so much that we have to let go of. Jose, you said all the things. You said all the things. Like, this is
on the
powerful.
record right now saying that it seems like Kia does believe in time travel.
I do.
And that time travel exists within ourselves and at the cellular level.
And the music is magic.
The music is...
What is Ratchet except being ahead of its time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ratchet is everywhere. It's ahead of its time. It's behind its time. It's in between time.
Ooh.
We're liminal, baby.
Yes. I know that's right.
Wow.
Well, how are you feeling now at the end of our journey? How'd you feel when we came in, and how are you feeling now?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I forgot what I felt at the beginning. Right now, I know that I just feel like I'm with family. I feel a little cracked open in that, like, I opened part of a memory that I hadn't thought about in the way that I just told you, that I kind of reframed it. And so I'm going to do a little bit more thinking about that, and actually might do a little drawing or art based on that. So I guess I feel inspired. Although I am going to finish cleaning, because like I said, Saturdays, all the sheets are washed.
Yeah.
Everything is, every single toilet is scrubbed. And then at night we have a movie night, and everything's clean, and we have popcorn, and all three of us will watch on Saturday night, right? Although I have a grant I should be working on, I could wait till tomorrow. So that's the other thing. And now I'm going to enter like my cleaning with this other type of layer of reflection that because sometimes I do it very automatically, and I'm just going to be like, okay, how much of this is also cleansing of other things right now? Because as much, the thing about the social political, I mean, we could do another hour and a half of
podcasting. You can come back.
But the interesting thing about being sociopolitically active is that there's and I think we're all in agreement around this, is that there is a tendency to take on a lot, right? And we are like staying informed, but knowledge is not just information, right? Knowledge is like, it affects the spirit. It's a layer of soot that you're kind of carrying, right, as you're trying to like stay informed. But knowledge also like taps into like other parts of the body that we need to find ways to either compartmentalize it or completely purge. sometimes, right? And then exercise does that in terms of the endorphins and so on. But the cleaning, the spiritual cleaning, has to be constant, and I feel like I personally wait a little too long to purge and cleanse, right? And then it starts seeping into other parts of my relationships with other people, and unfortunately, it tends to be with the people who are closest to us, like our partners, right?
Right.
We'll like explode on them, and then realize that it has nothing to do with them, and it has to do with all this other stuff that's happening either in the world or and so on and so on. So now you're making me think again. As I clean today, I'm going to be doing some of that spiritual cleaning. So go ahead, sorry.
It's so beautiful. I mean, I was thinking about what practices allow us to, you said sometimes you leave it too long. And I was thinking about what practices you find useful for that kind of spiritual cleansing and purging. Obviously, cleaning the house. That's something that I do too. Aaron knows this. I put things in order and tidy them and clean them to create order in my spirit.
Yes.
And, getting on the Peloton sounds like it's also, it's a source of, I was wondering if there were any other practices that you think of that you think are helpful for that.
Mowing the lawn. My dad actually, he worked, so when he moved here and he was raising us, he was actually working his full-time job as a butcher in California in a little market. But he also had, in order to make ends meet, he had his own small landscaping company. And so I helped him mow lawns growing up since I was like 11 or 12. And so for 7-8 years, I was helping him mow lawns, right? And so I have a very specific way. And I write about this in one of my articles from 2023. I'm plugging my articles.
That's right.
The Journal of the Journal of Learning Sciences article, where I talk about speculative fabulation. But lawn mowing has a very specific kind of like cyborgian meaning to me in terms of like how like you use certain augmentations to your body, and in this case, like the weed whacker and the lawnmower, to enact a certain type of agency in the crafting of the world around you. Now, when I mow my own lawn, it has a different type of valence. When I was growing up, we were mowing other people's lawns, predominantly white, rich people, right? We were hired to do a job. In many ways, you can say, oh, I was child labor and exploitation. But it wasn't. I mean, I didn't think about it that way. I was contributing to the household. But the way that I write about it and have thought about it is like, these can be very kind of seem like very fleeting, inconsequential moments of like someone doing a job. But for me, I took such pride in how I wanted it to specifically look. I have a very specific aesthetic to like how I mow a lawn, and for me, when I the moment I finish mowing a lawn, I just feel like this sense of pride of like, look what I just created. And I know that in a week I'm gonna have to do it again because it's gonna change, it's gonna grow, and I have to maintain it. And man, I tell you, it does some weird, it's so funny because in there, at a certain point, I can't remember who said, "Why are you mowing your own lawn if they don't mow it?" And I'm like, because for me, it's something I actually really appreciate it. Like, you're doing me a favor. I actually told the landlord, "Says you're doing me a favor by letting me mow the lawn because I'm able to connect to my family. Mowing the lawn reminds me of my dad. It reminds me of all this ratchetness stuff. Everything it's just there's a moment when I'm mowing the lawn that it does something around the meditative self-agency, agency, all that sort of stuff.
It reminds me of that episode of Love, Death, and Robots, the Zima Blue. I don't know if you've seen that, but
which one is that one?
There's this there's this pool cleaning machine that gains sentience,
Yes.
and as its
Yes.
final kind of like art installation, it falls apart back to its origins as a pool cleaning
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
That's what that in just thinking about the cyborg kind of aspects of that. That's what makes me
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
kind of like this return to origin in a way. Super
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That is cool. Okay, last
Anyway.
thoughts? Anything that you want?
That's gonna be for my last thoughts
Stop.
because it's
Yeah.
gonna keep going.
Is there anything else that you think the audience should hear, think about, know, do, consider?
Yeah, you know, oh gosh. It's let your freak flag fly. Um actually I just stole that from a drag queen, so don't I think that was from Sasha Velour. So sorry, Sasha.
Attribution.
Shout out to Sasha.
Attribution.
Yeah.
Shout out to Sasha. I just used your you know, it's just seek out those people who let you and allow you and encourage you to be your most authentic, unapologetic self. If there's anything that the kind of the ratchet aesthetic has taught me, is that those people can understand that that
Mhm.
ratchetness are like are the ride or dies. They tend to be the ride or dies, at least for me. So shout out to my husband. Shout out to Tiara Tanksley. She knows who she is. She's my buddy. And to Amina Norris. All those people are the ones who are like, I can be my most authentic ratchet and Sasquatch self with. And so no. Oh, and Danny Martinez too. And his wife, Elizabeth. We spent time with them in Mexico City.
So we close today on a note of love and appreciation and connection and community, which is, of course, the root of human thriving. And Jose, I'm just so grateful that you came to talk to us today. And
thank you for inviting me.
and entrusted us with your story.
Yes, absolutely that.
Yeah. And we'll see you again, because obviously there's more to talk about. So you're just going to have to come back. So it's not goodbye, it's until soon, you know?
Until soon.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun. Jose is hilarious. And it was also sentimental in a really special way.
Yeah, it was. I feel like we journeyed through all of the feels. We got an insider peek at life with the world's first doggy drag queen, the RuPaul. We went back to childhood. We talked about defiance, shame, pride, generations, the ratchet aesthetics and politics of Squatchismo, being disruption in human form, dolphins, and so much more. So much more.
Yeah. We went all over the place. And actually, a lot of our conversation felt like it was reclaiming, which is a powerful, thriving practice. There was like this solidifying of selfhood that happened in community and reclaimed community in a transformative way that was really powerful. And there was, of course, joy and relief and expansiveness. So there was a lot that brings us to thriving in the episode. I'm actually getting kind of emotional just thinking about it. I really am. It was powerful.
Yeah, it really was. Well, we would love to hear from you, our audience, about what you noticed. Does anything come up for you? We hope you'll tap in. And as always, you can comment on YouTube.
And that wraps up another episode of Ratchet Roundtable with Aaron and Dr. Kia. Stay loving, stay free.